William's hands trembled as he reached for the brass doorknob of his childhood home. The autumn wind whistled through the bare oak trees lining Maple Street, carrying with it the scent of fallen leaves and distant memories. Kate squeezed his shoulder gently, her wedding ring catching the late afternoon sunlight that filtered through the clouds above their small hometown of Millbrook. They had driven 3 hours from the city after receiving the call from Mrs. Henderson, their elderly neighbor. Her voice had been shaky on the phone, filled with an urgency that made William's stomach twist into knots. She had simply said, "You need to come home, William. There's something your father left behind, something important." The house looked exactly as it had 5 years ago when William last visited. The white picket fence still needed painting, and the rose bushes his mother had planted decades ago continued to bloom despite years of neglect. The front porch creaked under their weight as they approached the door, and William couldn't help but remember all the times he had run up these same steps as a child, eager to tell his parents about his day at school. His father, Robert, had been gone for 2 months now. The funeral had been small, attended mostly by neighbors and a few distant relatives. William and Kate had stayed for a week afterward, helping to sort through belongings and arrange for the house to be put on the market. They thought they had found everything important, but apparently they were wrong. Kate noticed the way William's jaw tensioned as he stared at the door. She had watched him struggle with his relationship with his father for the entire 8 years of their marriage. Robert had been a quiet man, emotionally distant, who had never quite learned how to express love in ways his son could understand. The two had spent years in an uncomfortable dance of unspoken words and missed opportunities. "Maybe we should have come sooner," William whispered, more to himself than to Kate. She knew he was thinking about all the conversations they never had, all the times he had picked up the phone to call his father, but had put it down again, unsure of what to say. The key still worked perfectly. William had kept it on his keychain all these years, though he rarely used it. As the door swung open, they were greeted by the familiar smell of his father's pipe tobacco and the lemon oil his mother had used on the furniture. Everything was exactly as they had left it, covered in white sheets to protect from dust. Mrs. Henderson appeared from the kitchen, her silver hair pulled back in the same neat bun she had worn for as long as William could remember. She was carrying a steaming cup of tea, and her eyes were red-rimmed as if she had been crying recently. "William, dear," she said, setting down her cup and embracing him warmly. "I'm so glad you came quickly. Kate, you look lovely as always." She hugged Kate as well, holding on a little longer than usual. "What did you find, Mrs. Henderson?" William asked, trying to keep his voice steady. "You sounded so upset on the phone." The old woman's hands fluttered nervously at her sides. She had been Robert's closest friend for over 30 years, ever since William's mother had passed away. She knew more about the family's history than almost anyone else. "It was in the attic," she began slowly. "I was helping to clear out some of the remaining items for the estate sale when I found a loose floorboard. Underneath, there was a wooden box. Your father had hidden it very carefully." William felt his heart begin to race. His father had never been a secretive man, at least not that he knew of. What could possibly be so important that Robert would hide it away? Mrs. Henderson led them up the narrow staircase to the second floor, past William's old bedroom with its faded baseball posters still hanging on the walls. The attic stairs creaked ominously as they climbed, and dust particles danced in the shaft of light coming from the single window. In the center of the attic floor sat a medium-sized wooden box, dark with age and wear. It looked handmade, with careful joints and a simple brass latch. Next to it was a crowbar, which Mrs. Henderson had obviously used to pry up the floorboard. "I didn't open it," she said quietly. "It didn't feel right. This was meant for you, William, I'm sure of it." Kate knelt beside the box and ran her fingers along its smooth surface. There was no lock, just the brass latch that had turned green with age. She looked up at William, who stood frozen in place, staring down at the mysterious container. "He never mentioned anything like this to you?" Kate asked Mrs. Henderson. The older woman shook her head slowly. "Robert was always a private man, but in the months before he died, he seemed to be carrying some kind of weight. He would sit on the front porch for hours, just staring down the street. Sometimes I would catch him talking to himself as if he was practicing something he wanted to say. William finally moved closer to the box. His legs felt heavy, as if he were walking through deep water. Part of him wanted to leave it unopened, to preserve whatever peace he had finally made with his father's memory. But another part of him, the part that had always wondered about the distance between them, needed to know what secrets his father had kept. "Should I open it now?" he asked, looking between Kate and Mrs. Henderson. Both women nodded, though Kate reached out and took his hand in hers. Whatever was in the box, they would face it together. The brass latch opened easily, as if it had been recently oiled. William lifted the lid slowly, and immediately saw a thick envelope with his name written on it in his father's careful handwriting. Beneath the envelope were what appeared to be photographs, documents, and other personal items he didn't recognize. The envelope felt heavy in his hands, and he noticed that his father had written, "For William, to be opened only after my death," on the front. His throat tightened as he realized his father had been planning for this moment, had known that someday William would find this box and read whatever words waited inside. Mrs. Henderson quietly excused herself, saying she would wait downstairs, to give them privacy. Kate moved closer to William, and together they sat on the dusty attic floor, the mysterious box between them and years of unspoken questions finally demanding answers. William's fingers shook as he carefully opened the envelope. The paper inside was expensive stationery, the kind his father had always used for important correspondence. The handwriting was neat and deliberate, though William could see places where his father had paused, perhaps struggling to find the right words. "My dear son," the letter began, and William had to stop reading for a moment. His father had never called him that, at least not that he could remember. Their conversations had always been formal, polite, but distant. Kate scooted closer, reading over his shoulder as he continued. The letter was dated just 3 months before Robert's death, which meant his father had been planning this revelation during some of his final weeks. "If you are reading this, then I am gone, and Mrs. Henderson has found the box I hoped would remain hidden forever. I have carried these secrets for 35 years, and I realize now that my silence has cost us both more than the truth ever could have. I was a coward, William, and my cowardice has shaped your entire life in ways you never knew." William looked up at Kate, confusion written across his face. What could his father possibly mean? What secrets could have affected his life so dramatically? The letter continued. "You have always wondered why I seemed so distant, why I could never find the words to tell you how proud I was of you. The truth is that every time I looked at you, I was reminded of the biggest mistake I ever made, and the lie I built our entire family on." Kate's hand found William's and squeezed gently. Neither of them spoke, but both felt the weight of what was coming. "Your mother, Sarah, was not your biological mother. She knew this, and she loved you as her own from the day you were born, but she was not the woman who gave birth to you. The woman who gave you life was someone I met during a very dark period of my marriage to Sarah, when we thought we could never have children of our own." The words hit William like a physical blow. He had to read the sentence 3 times before it sank in. Sarah, the woman whose grave he visited every year on her birthday, whose picture sat on his nightstand at home, was not his biological mother. Kate gasped softly beside him, and William realized he had stopped breathing altogether. The attic suddenly felt too small, too warm, despite the October chill seeping through the old window. Her name was Elena Rodriguez. The letter continued. She was 22 years old, working at the diner downtown to put herself through nursing school. I was going through the worst period of my life. Sarah and I had been trying to have children for 8 years. We had suffered 3 miscarriages, and the doctors told us it was unlikely we would ever conceive successfully. I was drinking too much, working too many hours, and Sarah and I barely spoke to each other anymore. William set the letter down for a moment and reached for one of the photographs in the box. The image showed a young Hispanic woman with dark hair and kind eyes, smiling at the camera. She was beautiful, with a warmth in her expression that immediately reminded William of his own reflection. Elena and I had an affair that lasted 4 months. She was lonely, far from her family in Texas, and I was a mess of a man looking for any escape from my failing marriage. When she told me she was pregnant, we both knew it would destroy everything. Sarah and I were already hanging by a thread, and Elena had dreams of becoming a nurse that a baby would make impossible. Kate was crying now, quiet tears that she wiped away with her sleeve. William felt numb, as if he were reading about someone else's life. We made a decision that I have regretted every day since. Elena would have the baby, and Sarah and I would adopt you legally. Elena would finish school and move away, and none of us would ever speak of it again. It seemed like the perfect solution. Sarah would finally have the child she desperately wanted. Elena could pursue her career, and I could save my marriage. The photograph showed Elena holding a baby, presumably William, in what looked like a hospital room. She was looking down at him with such tenderness that William felt his eyes fill with tears. But nothing about it was perfect. Elena held you for 1 day before signing the adoption papers. I watched her say goodbye to you, and I saw her heart break in a way that still haunts me. She kissed your forehead and whispered something in Spanish that I never understood, and then she walked out of our lives forever. William found another photograph, this one showing Elena with an older couple who looked like they might be her parents. On the back, someone had written, "Elena with Mama and Papa, Christmas 1987. Sarah loved you completely from that first moment. She never treated you as anything other than her own son, and in every way that mattered, you were. But I struggled. Every time I looked at you, I saw Elena's eyes, Elena's smile, and I was reminded of my betrayal. I was reminded that our happiness was built on another woman's sacrifice." The letter went on to explain how Robert had tried to find Elena over the years to make sure she was doing well. But she had disappeared completely. The nursing school had no forwarding address, and her former co-workers at the diner said she had moved back to Texas, but no one knew where. I became distant because I was afraid. I was afraid that if I let myself love you the way I wanted to, Sarah would see the guilt in my eyes. I was afraid that if I held you too close, I would slip and tell you the truth before you were ready. Most of all, I was afraid that if you ever found out, you would hate me for keeping Elena away from you. William realized he was sobbing now, deep, choking sobs that came from somewhere he didn't know existed. Kate wrapped her arms around him and held him as 32 years of confusion and hurt began to make terrible sense. The final paragraphs of the letter were the hardest to read. "I know now that my fear hurt you more than the truth ever could. You grew up thinking your father didn't love you, when the reality was that I loved you so much it terrified me. You deserved to know where you came from. You deserved the chance to know Elena, if she wanted to know you. I stole that from both of you, and I will carry that guilt to my grave." At the bottom of the box, underneath more photographs and what appeared to be medical records, William found a small, worn piece of paper with an address written in different handwriting. It was in San Antonio, Texas, and dated just 2 years. Iego attached to it was a note in his father's handwriting. "I finally found her. She is a registered nurse at Methodist Hospital. She never married, never had other children. I wrote her a letter but never sent it. I was still a coward, even at the end. She deserves to know that her son grew up to be a good man. You deserve to know the woman who gave you life. The choice is yours now." The drive home to the city that evening was the longest 3 hours of William's life. Kate sat beside him in the passenger seat, the wooden box secured in the back of their car along with copies of all the documents they had found. Neither of them had spoken much since leaving Millbrook, both lost in their own thoughts about what this discovery meant for their future. William kept glancing at the rearview mirror, as if he could see the box behind him. Inside it were birth certificates, medical records, and dozens of photographs of Elena at different stages of her life. His father had been more thorough in his research than William had initially realized. There were copies of Elena's nursing, school transcripts, a newspaper clipping about her graduation, and even what appeared to be surveillance photos taken from a distance, showing her entering and leaving the hospital where she worked. The thought that his father had been watching Elena, even from afar, made William feel uncomfortable. It seemed like a violation of her privacy, but he also understood the desperation that must have driven his father to such lengths. Robert had been carrying this guilt for over 3 decades, wondering about the woman whose life he had forever changed. "What are you thinking about?" Kate finally asked as they passed the city limits sign. William was quiet for a long moment. "I'm thinking about all the times I felt like something was missing. You know how I always said I felt like an outsider in my own family? Like there was some joke everyone was in on except me?" Kate nodded. She had heard William express these feelings many times over the years, usually late at night when he was feeling particularly melancholy about his relationship with his father. "I used to think it was because I wasn't good enough," William continued. "Because I chose art instead of business, because I moved to the city instead of staying in Millbrook. I thought Dad was disappointed in me. And now I realize he was disappointed in himself. Every time he looked at me, he saw his own failure. Not mine, his." William's voice cracked slightly. "I spent 32 years thinking my father didn't love me, when really he loved me so much he was afraid to show it." They pulled into their driveway just after 10 o'clock. Their small suburban house looked exactly the same as it had when they left that morning, but everything felt different now. William carried the box inside and set it carefully on their dining room table, as if it contained something fragile that might break. Kate made tea while William spread out the photographs on the table. In the better lighting of their home, he could see details he had missed in the dusty attic. Elena had been truly beautiful, with expressive dark eyes and a smile that seemed to light up every picture. More importantly, he could see himself in her features. The shape of his eyes, the curve of his mouth, the way she tilted her head slightly when she smiled. "She looks like you," Kate said softly, setting a mug of tea beside him. "I know. It's strange seeing myself in someone else's face after all these years of wondering where I got certain features." William picked up a photo of Elena in her nursing uniform, probably taken sometime in the early 1990s. "Do you think I should contact her?" It was the question that had been haunting him since they found the address. Part of him desperately wanted to know more about Elena, to understand where he had come from and what kind of person his biological mother was. But another part of him was terrified. What if she didn't want to hear from him? What if learning about her son's existence brought back painful memories she had spent years trying to forget? "I think," Kate said carefully, "that's a decision only you can make. But I also think your father was right about one thing. She deserves to know that her son grew up to be a good man." They spent the next hour going through all the documents in the box. Robert had been meticulous in his record keeping. There were copies of the original adoption papers, showing that Elena had signed away all parental rights when William was just 3 days old. There were medical records showing that Elena had had a difficult pregnancy, but that William had been born healthy and strong. Most heartbreaking were the items that Elena had left behind. A small silver cross necklace that she had apparently worn during her pregnancy. A journal with only a few entries, written in a mixture of English and Spanish, documenting her thoughts during those difficult months. And a letter, written in Elena's handwriting, that was addressed to my baby. William's hands trembled as he opened the letter. It was written on the same expensive stationery his father had used, suggesting that Robert had given it to her. "My precious baby," it began in Elena's neat script. "I am writing this on the day you were born, before I have to say goodbye. I want you to know that giving you up is the hardest thing I will ever do, but I am doing it because I love you more than my own life." Kate moved her chair closer to William's so she could read along with him. "Your adoptive parents are good people who will love you and give you opportunities I never could. Your father is educated and successful, and your mother has wanted a baby for so many years that I know she will treasure you. They will give you a stable home, a good education, and all the things I dreamed of having when I was growing up." Elena went on to tell her son about her own childhood in a small town outside San Antonio, about her parents who had worked multiple jobs to help her attend nursing school, and about her dreams of someday working in pediatrics to help other children. "I hope that someday, when you are old enough to understand, you will know that I loved you enough to let you go, I hope you will have a wonderful life, full of love and happiness and success. And I hope that maybe, if God is willing, we will meet again someday when the time is right. At the bottom of the letter, Elena had included her full name, Elena Maria Rodriguez, and the name of the small town where she had grown up, Uvalde, Texas. William set the letter down and stared at the table. 32 years ago, a 22-year-old woman had made the most difficult decision of her life, and now he was holding the proof of her love and sacrifice in his hands. She was just a kid herself, he said quietly. Younger than we are now when she had to make that choice. Kate nodded, wiping tears from her eyes. She sounds like she was a remarkable person, strong and selfless and full of love. Do you think she ever regretted it? William asked. I think she probably thought about you every day for the rest of her life, Kate replied honestly. But I don't think she regretted giving you a chance at a better life. That's what good mothers do, isn't it? They sacrifice for their children's happiness. William looked at the address his father had found. Elena Rodriguez, 1247 Magnolia Street, San Antonio, Texas. She was probably 57 years old now, maybe 58. She had dedicated her life to nursing, to caring for other people's children since she couldn't raise her own. I think I want to write her a letter, William said finally. Not to disrupt her life or make demands, just to let her know that I'm okay, that her sacrifice wasn't wasted. Kate smiled and kissed his cheek. I think that's a beautiful idea. And I think it's exactly what your father would have wanted you to do. Writing the letter took William 3 weeks and 17 drafts. Each attempt felt either too formal or too intimate, too demanding or too distant. How do you introduce yourself to the woman who gave birth to you but had to give you away? How do you summarize 32 years of life in a way that shows gratitude without creating guilt? Kate found him at the kitchen table every morning before work, surrounded by crumpled papers and empty coffee cups, struggling to find the right words. She would kiss the top of his head and remind him that there was no perfect way to reach out. To Elena, that any contact would be better than the silence that had lasted over 3 decades. The final version was simple and honest. William told Elena who he was, that he had only recently learned of her existence and that he wanted her to know he had lived a good life. He thanked her for the sacrifice she had made and assured her that he wasn't looking to disrupt her life or make any demands. He simply wanted her to know that her son was well and happy and that he had grown up knowing love. He included a recent photograph of himself and Kate, along with copies of some of his artwork. William was a successful graphic designer, something he hoped might make Elena proud. He had always been drawn to creating beautiful things, and now he wondered if that artistic sensitivity had come from her. The letter was mailed on a Tuesday morning in November. William drove to the post office himself, unable to trust such an important piece of mail to their regular postal carrier. As he dropped the envelope into the slot, he felt a mixture of relief and terror. There was no taking it back now. For 2 weeks, nothing happened. William checked the mail obsessively, wondering if Elena had received the letter, if she had read it, if she had thrown it away without opening it. Kate reminded him that Elena might need time to process such unexpected news, or that she might not even live at that address anymore. It had been over 2 years since his father had found her information. Then, on a Thursday afternoon, William's phone rang. The caller ID showed a San Antonio area code, and his heart began to race. "Hello?" he said, trying to keep his voice steady. "Is this William?" The voice was soft, accented, and unmistakably nervous. "Yes, this is William. This is Elena Rodriguez. I received your letter." William sat down heavily in the nearest chair. After 32 years, he was finally speaking to his biological mother. The moment felt surreal, like something that was happening to someone else. "Elena," he said, and then found himself unable to continue. There were so many things he wanted to say, so many questions he wanted to ask, but suddenly his mind was completely blank. "You look just like I imagined you would," Elena said softly. "The photograph you sent, you have your grandfather's eyes. My father's eyes." "I do?" William had never known anything about his genetic heritage, Had never seen his own features reflected in family photos? Yes, he was a very handsome man, very kind. You would have liked him. Elena paused, and William could hear her taking a shaky breath. I have thought about you every single day since you were born. Every birthday, every Christmas, every time I saw a little boy who would have been your age. William felt tears starting to form in his eyes. I'm sorry if my letter upset you. I wasn't sure if I should contact you, but I felt like you deserved to know that I turned out okay. Upset me? Elena laughed, but it was a laugh mixed with tears. William, receiving your letter was like getting a piece of my heart back. I have prayed for this day for 32 years. I have wondered and worried and hoped, and now I know that my son grew up to be a good man with a beautiful wife and a successful career. They talked for over an hour that first day. Elena told William about her work at the hospital, about how she had specialized in pediatric nursing because she wanted to take care of other people's children since she couldn't raise her own. She told him about his grandparents who had both passed away in the previous decade, and about his extended family in Texas who had never known he existed. I never married, Elena admitted near the end of the conversation. I dated a few times over the years, but I could never fully give my heart to anyone. Part of it always belonged to the baby I had to give away. I'm sorry, William said. I never thought about how hard it must have been for you all these years. Don't apologize, Elena said firmly. I made the choice I thought was best for you. Your father's letter told me about the woman who raised you, about how much she loved you. Sarah sounds like she was a wonderful mother. William was surprised. My father wrote to you? Yes, about 6 months ago. He told me about your life, about your marriage, about your career. He said he was sorry for keeping us apart all these years, and that he thought I deserved to know how my son had turned out. Elena's voice grew sad. I was working up the courage to write back to him when I learned from his obituary that he had passed away. I'm sorry for your loss, William. This was news to William. His father had contacted Elena before his death, had tried to bridge the gap that his own fear had created. It was one more piece of the complicated puzzle of Robert's final months. He left me a box with information about you, William explained. That's how I learned the truth about my adoption. He wrote me a letter explaining everything. He was a complicated man, Elena said gently. He made mistakes, but he loved you very much. That was clear in every word of his letter to me. By the time they hung up, Elena and William had made plans to meet in person. Elena would fly to William's city the following month for a weekend that would give them time to talk and get to know each other without the pressure of a longer visit. Are you nervous? Kate asked that evening as William told her about the phone call. Terrified, William admitted, but also excited. For the first time in my life, I'm going to meet someone who shares my DNA, who can tell me where certain parts of myself came from. What if it's awkward? What if you don't have anything in common? William had wondered about that too. Elena was a completely different person from the mother who had raised him, from a different culture and background. But during their phone conversation, he had felt an immediate connection, a sense of familiarity that went beyond mere blood relation. I think it will be okay, he said. She sounded so genuinely happy to hear from me. And she's been thinking about me all these years, just like I've been wondering about where I came from. Kate smiled and squeezed his hand. I can't wait to meet her. From everything you've told me, she sounds like an amazing woman. She is, William said. And I think I finally understand something my father wrote in his letter. He said Elena deserved to know that her son grew up to be a good man. But I think maybe I deserve to know that I came from a good woman too. The morning of Elena's arrival, William woke up before his alarm. He had barely slept, his mind racing with anticipation and anxiety about meeting his biological mother face to face. Kate found him in the kitchen at 6 a.m, making his third cup of coffee and staring out the window at their frost-covered garden. You're going to make yourself sick with all that caffeine, she said gently, wrapping her arms around him from behind. I can't help it. What if she takes one look at me and regrets coming? What if we have nothing to talk about? What if this whole thing is a mistake? Kate turned him around to face her. William, she flew halfway across the country to meet you. She's been waiting 32 years for this moment. It's going to be perfect because it matters to both of you. Elena's flight was scheduled to arrive at 2 in the afternoon. William and Kate spent the morning cleaning their already spotless house and preparing a guest room. William had printed and framed several of his best design pieces to show Elena, hoping she would be proud of his artistic abilities. Kate had researched traditional Mexican recipes and prepared a meal that might remind Elena of home. At the airport, William felt like a teenager on a first date. He checked his appearance in every reflective surface and kept running his hands through his hair. Kate held his arm steady as they walked toward the arrival gate, her presence the only thing keeping him grounded. Flight 847 from San Antonio now arriving at Gate 12, the announcement echoed through the terminal. William's heart hammered against his chest as passengers began emerging from the jetway. He had studied Elena's photographs so intensely that he was sure he would recognize her immediately, but as person after person walked past, none of them was her. Then he saw her. Elena Rodriguez was smaller than he had imagined, probably about 5 feet 4 inches tall with silver-streaked hair pulled back in a neat bun. She wore a simple navy blue dress and carried a small suitcase. But what struck William most was how nervous she looked. She was scanning the crowd with the same anxious energy he was feeling, clearly as worried about this meeting as he was. Their eyes met across the crowded terminal, and William felt something shift in his chest. This was the woman who had given him life, who had carried him for 9 months and then made the hardest decision of her life. She was real. She was here, and she was looking at him with tears already forming in her eyes. "William?" she called softly, taking a hesitant step forward. "Elena," he replied, and then they were both moving toward each other. The embrace was tentative at first, both of them unsure of the boundaries in this unprecedented situation. But then Elena's arms tightened around him, and William felt her, small frame shaking with sobs. "My son," she whispered in Spanish, then repeated it in English. "My son." Kate stood nearby, tears streaming down her face as she watched the reunion she had helped make possible. When Elena and William finally separated, Elena turned to her immediately. "You must be Kate," Elena said, pulling Kate into a warm hug. "Thank you for taking such good care of my boy. He looks so happy and healthy." "It's wonderful to finally meet you," Kate replied. "William has been so excited about your visit." The drive home was filled with nervous chatter. Elena asked about their neighborhood, their work, their daily routines. William pointed out local landmarks and restaurants, playing tour guide to fill the silence. But underneath the polite conversation, both of them were stealing glances at each other, marveling at the physical similarities and wondering about all the years they had missed. At the house, Elena admired Kate's cooking and William's artwork with genuine enthusiasm. She examined each of his designs carefully, asking thoughtful questions about his creative process and nodding approvingly at his use of color and composition. "You got this from my father," she said, holding up a particularly intricate piece. "He was always drawing, always creating something with his hands. He would have been so proud to see your talent." Over dinner, the conversation became more personal. Helena told them stories about William's grandparents, about the small farm where she had grown up, about the traditions and customs that were part of their family heritage. William learned that he was Mexican-American on his mother's side, something he had never known about himself. "I brought something for you," Elena said after they had finished eating. She retrieved a small wrapped package from her suitcase and handed it to William with shaking hands. Inside was a silver pendant on a thin chain, clearly old and well-worn. The pendant bore the image of the Virgin of Guadalupe, and William recognized it from some of the photographs his father had collected. "This belonged to your great-grandmother," Elena explained. "My grandmother wore it every day of her life, and she gave it to me when I was 16. I was wearing it the day you were born, and I always planned to give it to you if we ever met." William held the pendant carefully, feeling the weight of generations of history in his palm. "Are you sure you want me to have this?" "I have been saving it for you for 32 years, Elena said firmly. "It belongs with you now." As the evening progressed, William found himself relaxing in Elena's presence. She had a gentle sense of humor and a way of making him feel completely accepted exactly as he was. When he showed her photographs from his childhood, she studied each one intently, as if trying to memorize every stage of his development that she had missed. "Sarah was a beautiful woman," Elena said, looking at a family photo from William's high school graduation. "She looks like she loved you very much. I can see it in her eyes when she looks at you." William nodded, feeling a bittersweet mixture of gratitude and sadness. "She did. She never made me feel like I was anything other than her son. Even now, knowing the truth, I still think of her as my real mother." "Good," Elena said firmly. "That's exactly how it should be. She raised you. She loved you. She was there for all the important moments. I gave you life, but she gave you a life worth living." Later that evening, as Kate prepared tea in the kitchen, William and Elena sat together on the living room couch, looking through more photographs. Elena had brought a small album of her own, filled with pictures of relatives William had never known existed. "This is your cousin Maria," Elena said, pointing to a young woman in a graduation cap and gown. "She just finished medical school, and this is your Uncle Carlos, my brother. He owns a restaurant in Austin now. Do they know about me?" William asked. Elena shook her head. "I never told anyone in my family what happened. I was so ashamed at the time, so afraid of disappointing everyone. My parents were very traditional, very religious. They would not have understood." "Are you still ashamed?" Elena looked at him with surprise. "Ashamed? Oh, William, no. I was never ashamed of you. I was ashamed of the situation, of the choices I made that led to your conception. But you were never something to be ashamed of. You were a gift, even if I couldn't keep you." As the night grew later, Elena began to share more difficult memories. She told William about the months of her pregnancy, how she had hidden it from her family and friends, how she had worked at the diner until just 2 weeks before his birth to save money for her remaining school expenses. "The hardest part," she said quietly, "was not having anyone to share the excitement with. When you moved inside me for the first time, when I felt your hiccups, when I wondered if you would have my eyes or your father's nose, I had no one to tell. I kept a journal, but it wasn't the same as having someone to talk to." "I'm sorry you had to go through that alone," William said. "I wasn't completely alone. The nurses at the hospital were kind to me. They knew my situation, and they made sure I had everything I needed. And your father, Robert, he checked on me regularly during the pregnancy. He felt responsible, and he wanted to make sure you were developing normally." This was another piece of information that surprised William. His father had been more involved in the pregnancy than the letter had indicated. "He was there when you were born," Elena continued. "Not in the delivery room, but in the waiting area. When the nurse brought you out to show him, I saw him through the window. He was crying. I had never seen a grown man cry like that before." "What was it like?" William asked quietly. "Those first few days before the adoption?" Elena was quiet for a long time, and William wondered if he had asked too personal a question. But then she began to speak, her voice barely above a whisper. "Those were the most beautiful and the most heartbreaking days of my life. You were perfect, William. 10 fingers, 10 toes, a healthy cry, and the most alert eyes I had ever seen on a newborn. The nurses let me feed you and hold you as much as I wanted, because they knew I only had a short time." Elena wiped tears from her eyes before continuing. "I memorized everything about you. The way you smelled, the tiny sounds you made when you slept, the way your little hand would grip my finger. I sang to you in Spanish all the lullabies my mother had sung to me. I wanted you to hear my voice, to know that your first mother loved you." "What did you sing?" William asked, though he wasn't sure why it mattered. Elena smiled through her tears and began to hum softly, then sang in a gentle voice, "Duérmete mi niño, duérmete mi amor, duérmete pedazo de mi corazón." The melody was hauntingly beautiful, and William felt something stir in his memory, though he couldn't place what it was. "That means sleep my child, sleep my love, sleep little piece of my heart," Elena translated. "It sounds familiar," William said, confused. Elena looked at him with surprise. It should. I sang it to you for 3 days straight. Sometimes I wondered if you would remember, if somewhere deep down you would carry a piece of those first few days with you. William felt a chill run down his spine. Throughout his childhood, he had been drawn to that particular melody, though he had never known where he had heard it. He had hummed it unconsciously when he was nervous or sad, and Kate had noticed him doing it during stressful times at work. I think I do remember, he said softly. I've been humming that song my whole life, without knowing why. Elena's face lit up with joy and amazement. Really? You really remember? I think so. It's like it's been buried somewhere in my mind all these years, waiting for this moment. They sat together in comfortable silence for a while, both processing the profound connection they had just discovered. Kate returned with tea and found them holding hands, Elena's small fingers intertwined with William's larger ones, both of them crying tears that seemed to be equal parts joy and healing. Elena stayed for 4 days, and each one brought new discoveries and deeper connections. On Saturday morning, she insisted on cooking breakfast for William and Kate, preparing traditional Mexican dishes that filled their kitchen with unfamiliar but wonderful aromas. William watched her move confidently around their kitchen, seasoning and tasting with the expertise of someone who had been cooking these recipes her entire life. My grandmother taught me to make these when I was 7 years old, Elena explained as she flipped perfectly golden tortillas on the stovetop. She said a woman who couldn't feed her family properly wasn't much of a woman at all. Will you teach me? William asked, surprising himself with the request. Elena's face broke into the widest smile he had seen from her yet. Of course. These are your family recipes too, even if you didn't grow up with them. They spent the morning cooking together, Elena patiently showing William how to knead masa for tortillas and how to balance the spices in her grandmother's famous salsa verde. Kate took pictures of them working side by side, documenting this unexpected cooking lesson that felt like so much more than just learning recipes. You have good hands for this, Elena observed as William successfully flipped his first homemade tortilla. Steady and patient. Those are important qualities for cooking and for life. During lunch, Elena told them more stories about their extended family in Texas. She showed them pictures on her phone of cousins and aunts and uncles who shared William's features in various combinations. There was cousin Miguel, who had William's same artistic eye and worked as a photographer. There was great aunt Rosa, who had the same stubborn cowlick that William had struggled with his entire life. They would love to meet you, Elena said carefully, but I understand if you're not ready for that. This is a lot to process. William looked at Kate, who nodded encouragingly. I think I'd like that, he said. Maybe not all at once, but eventually. I've always felt like I was missing part of my identity. Now I know what that part was. On Sunday, Elena asked if they could visit Sarah's grave. William was surprised by the request, but Elena explained that she wanted to pay her respects to the woman who had raised her son. At the cemetery, Elena knelt beside Sarah's headstone and placed a small bouquet of white roses on the grave. She spoke quietly in Spanish for several minutes while William and Kate stood nearby, giving her privacy for what seemed like a deeply personal moment. What did you say to her? William asked as they walked back to the car. I thanked her, Elena replied simply. I told her that I could see how well she had loved you, and that I was grateful she had been the mother you needed. I asked her to watch over all of us as we figure out this new chapter in our lives. Do you think she would have approved of us meeting? Elena considered this carefully. From everything you've told me about Sarah, I think she would have wanted you to know the whole truth about where you came from. Love doesn't diminish when it's shared, William. Sarah will always be your mother, but now you have another mother too. There's room in your heart for both of us. On Sunday evening, as Elena packed for her return flight, the mood in the house became more somber. None of them wanted this reunion to end, but they all knew that Elena had to return to her life in San Antonio, and William and Kate had to process everything they had learned. This isn't goodbye, Elena said as she folded her clothes carefully back into her suitcase. This is just the beginning. We have 32 years to catch up on, and I don't plan to waste any more time. They had already made plans for William and Kate to visit San Antonio in the spring, where Elena could show them the places that had shaped her life and introduce them to the extended family that William was now eager to meet. At the airport, the goodbye was easier than William had expected. Instead of the desperate clinging he had feared, their farewell felt hopeful and forward-looking. "I love you, mijo," Elena said, using the Spanish term of endearment that she had been teaching him all weekend. "I have loved you every day since you were born, and I will love you every day for the rest of my life." "I love you too," William replied and meant it completely. "Thank you for finding the courage to meet me. Thank you for everything." As they watched Elena's plane taxi down the runway, Kate slipped her hand into William's. "How are you feeling?" she asked. William thought about the question seriously. 4 days ago, he had been a man struggling to understand his place in the world, haunted by a sense of incompleteness he couldn't name. Now he felt like he had found a missing piece of himself, not just in learning about his biological heritage, but in experiencing the kind of unconditional love that transcends time and circumstance. "Whole," he said finally. "For the first time in my life, I feel completely whole." That evening, as they settled back into their normal routine, William found himself humming Elena's lullaby while he washed the dinner dishes. Kate smiled when she recognized the melody, understanding now why her husband had been drawn to that particular tune throughout their marriage. Later, as they were getting ready for bed, William discovered something Elena had left behind. Tucked inside the guest room pillowcase was an envelope with his name on it, written in Elena's careful handwriting. Inside was a letter, much shorter than the one his father had left, but no less meaningful. "My dear William, I wanted to leave you with something to remember this weekend by. These 4 days have been the most precious gift of my life. Watching you with Kate, seeing the kind, thoughtful man you have become, knowing that you are happy and loved, has healed a part of my heart that I thought would always ache. I want you to know that I don't expect anything from you that you're not ready to give. You don't owe me anything because I gave birth to you. The only thing I ask is that you remember you are loved, not just by the family who raised you, but by the family you came from. You carry the best parts of all of us with you. Your father, Robert, was right about one thing in his letter to me. You did grow up to be a good man, but what he didn't know is that goodness was always in you, from the very beginning. I could see it in your eyes when you were 3 days old, and I can see it now in the way you treat your wife, in the beauty you create with your art, in the kindness you showed a nervous old woman who was meeting her son for the first time. Thank you for giving me the chance to know you. Thank you for letting me be your mother again, even if it's different than it would have been. Thank you for understanding that love doesn't follow neat, simple paths, but that it always finds a way. Con todo mi amor, Mama Elena." William read the letter twice, then handed it to Kate. As she read it, he looked out their bedroom window at the stars and thought about the chain of events that had led to this moment. His father's death, the discovery of the hidden box, the courage to reach out to Elena, and now this new understanding of where he came from and who he was. Tomorrow he would call Elena to make sure she had arrived home safely. Next week, he would start researching his Mexican heritage and perhaps begin learning Spanish. In the spring, he and Kate would travel to San Antonio to meet the extended family he never knew existed. But tonight, for the first time in his life, William fell asleep feeling completely at peace with his identity. He was the son of Sarah, who had raised him with endless love and devotion. He was the son of Robert, whose fear and guilt had kept him distant, but whose love had ultimately led to this reunion. And he was the son of Elena, whose sacrifice had given him life and whose courage had given him wholeness. As Kate turned off the bedside lamp, William's last conscious thought was of Elena's lullaby, the melody that had connected them across 32 years of separation and would now connect them for whatever time they had left together. He was no longer the man who wondered where he belonged. He was William, loved son of 3 imperfect but devoted parents, husband to Kate, artist, and now keeper of family traditions that stretched back generations. He was finally and completely home.